Recently, I was able to go on a solo motorcycle adventure into the Australian Outback. This video is a recap with lessons learned. Keep watching as you may find some of the things that I've learned useful, or even better, you may be able to share some more tips with us in the comments section. The more knowledge shared, the more prepared we can all be when embarking on similar adventures. Being able to go on a 2-week motorcycle adventure into the Australian Outback can only be described as a blessing. Even though this wasn't my first solo trip out there, I can honestly say that this was definitely the most memorable one. I have always been drawn to the Outback. The vastness of it all, abandoned homesteads in ruins, desert-like landscapes, amazing sunsets, emus trying to race you, kangaroos hopping alongside you, and it's all very hard and very unforgiving. The Outback is all that and much more, and in this trip I was able to take it all in and unplug. The original plan was to go on a 14-day ride and complete a set of bucket list items. I was to leave Melbourne and revisit the Flinders Ranges, then head out to Arkaroola via Blindman, from there onto Cameron Corner and eventually Birdsville, where I would start making my way back home. However, if you watched the last episode, then you already know that things did not go according to plan. I had an accident on Mount Hopeless Road, approximately 50 kilometers before I got to Strzelecki Track. I went around a corner and hit some bull dust, followed by some really deep sand, resulting in 3 fractured ribs, rendering my plans dead in the water. I had to make my way to Lyndhurst and felt every single corrugation over 240 kilometers before I managed to get back onto tarmac, followed by a further 1400 kilometers to get myself back home. Despite this painful outcome, the trip itself was amazing. But did I learn anything from this mishap? Let me start with the obvious. Do not overpack. Avoid packing too many luxury items. If you've been out motor camping in the past and you've packed something that you didn't use, just dump it. Unless it's a necessary tool, leave it at home. If it's something like a portable table or a backup stove, leave it behind. Only pack emergency food. On this trip, I brought food to last me for at least 2 to 3 days. It was a waste of space and unnecessary weight on the bike. You can restock supplies everywhere, even in the middle of the Outback. Just pack some emergency food that will last you for a full day. In case of an emergency, unless you have a medical condition, nothing will happen to you if you don't eat for 1 day or 2. As humans, we can go for many days without food. Water, on the other hand, is another story. Ensure that you always have enough water to last you for a few days, especially in the middle of the Outback. And this is even more important when the weather is warmer. I found myself drinking 3 times as much as what I normally drink at home. A satellite communications device. You've got Buckley's chance of getting a mobile signal in the middle of the Outback unless you're with Telstra, and even then it's spotty at best. In my humble opinion, if you plan on travelling into the Australian Outback, then under no circumstances should you venture into the Outback without some form of satellite communications device. I don't want to promote one brand over another, just as long as you have some sort of 2-way satellite communication. If you can afford to take a satellite phone, even better. I'm not a fan of EPIRBs, as there's no way of knowing if the distress signal has reached anyone, and more importantly, what's being done about it. And as far as I know, there's no way to differentiate your emergency signal from a life-threatening incident to a vehicle breakdown, giving emergency services a chance to better understand your situation. I use a Garmin InReach, which allows me to connect it to my phone and exchange messages with either emergency services or family and friends. I used mine when I had the accident, not for emergency services, but to notify and reassure my family and friends who were tracking my trip within the Garmin website. I'm really happy with mine. A lighter bike. One of you in the comments correctly suggested that perhaps I should have ventured on this trip with a lighter motorcycle. And I agree that perhaps going on a trip like this on my own with a big GS Adventure perhaps wasn't a smart idea. Be as it may, this bike makes me happy. I had a constant smile on my face every second I was on it. I knew that I could pick it up if I dropped it. I've done so many times in the past. The question is, once I was injured, had I been riding a lighter bike, would I have been able to pick it up? I guess we will never know for sure. However, after I was injured, even picking up my duffel bag was a challenge, and that weighed 20 kilograms at most. A lighter bike would still weigh north of 120 kilos. So even though I would agree that a lighter bike would have made a lot more sense on a solo trip like this, after my injury, it wouldn't have made much difference in my ability to pick it up or not. On hindsight, I wouldn't have changed a thing. In fact, something tells me that I would have felt even more so every single corrugation on the way back on a lighter bike. What would be your weapon of choice for a trip like this? Let me know in the comments. Physical fitness. As you can see, both the twins and I are a fine physical specimen, which made all the difference on the trip. Seriously though, my advice is to get some form of exercise before you head out to some challenging conditions. Your body will thank you for it. For a month before my trip, I was walking a minimum of 10 kilometers a day at a very fast pace. Plenty of squats too. But if you plan on doing a lot of kilometers per day on the bike, then nothing beats practicing just that as often as you can before setting off onto your big multi-day adventure. The more often and longer you ride, as closer you get to the trip, the better. Sleeping bag liner. Without getting into too many details, I can tell you that I've stayed in some hotels that you wouldn't exactly call the cleanest. Mind you, they weren't cheap either. Best pro tip that I was given is to use a sleeping bag liner when sleeping on a motel bed. Just trust me on this one. I have a version that's made out of silk and cotton, and I'm really happy with it. Now, if you think that you could share a tip with the rest of us that would embellish the collective knowledge, please do so in the comments section. I genuinely would love to read your thoughts and suggestions. I hope that you've enjoyed the series. I have a lot more videos coming up in the very near future. So if you haven't done so already, please consider subscribing to the channel and giving us a thumbs up. See you down the road.